The scrolls of the Eldar tell us that the history of Middle-earth is a great tapestry, you see, one woven with threads of both silver and of shadow. It's a tale told in the grand deeds of kings and of mighty warriors, for sure, but it is also a chronicle of something else, of quiet endurance, a patience deeper than the very roots of the mountains, and of a duty held for ages uncounted. This, then, is the telling of such a life, the history of Círdan the Shipwright. These are the words that defined an entire existence. An existence that began in the starlight of the world's dawn, and well, it wouldn't end until the final fading of the elves from the lands of men. It was a vow, you see, a vow taken by the shores of the Great Sea, and a vow that would be fulfilled to its very final solemn letter. So when that white ship departed from Mithlund, the Grey Havens, bearing the keepers of the Three Rings into the west, an elf stood upon the quay and watched it go. He didn't board. No. He had fashioned its timbers, he'd set its sails, just as he had for countless ships before. But his place, his duty, was on the shore. He remained, his long silver beard, a true marvel among his people, just stirring in the sea. You must understand, he was the most ancient of all the elves left in the mortal lands. He was already old when the Lady Galadriel was but a child in the bliss of Valinor. He had walked beneath the light of the two trees, long, long before the first rising of the sun and moon. His memory, it was a vast sea, holding in its depths the whole sorrowful history of the world. He had watched the mightiest of the Noldor and the fairest of his own kin sail away into the west, while he stayed. Always he remained, building the white ships, guarding the havens, and waiting. His name was Círdan, the Shipwright. And his story, well, it's the long thread that binds the very awakening of the firstborn to the last elven refuge in all of Middle-earth. To truly comprehend a life like his, we have to turn back the pages of the Red Book to the very, very beginning, to a time when the world was young, lit not by sun or moon, but only by the cold, clear light of the stars that Varda Elantari herself had kindled in the vaults of heaven. The lore tells that Círdan was among the very first elves to awaken by the still waters of Cuiviénen. Now, in those days, he wasn't yet called Círdan, the Shipwright. His name was Nawe. He was of the Teleri, the third and largest of the elven kindreds, those who would eventually be known as the Sea Elves. And he was counted as a kinsman of their two great lords, Elwë, who had become Thingol Greymantle, and his brother Olwë. And yet, from his very first days, the spirit of Nawe wasn't turned toward lordship. No, it was turned westward. A deep, abiding yearning just pulled at his heart, a desire for the great sea, Belegaer, whose roaring waves he had never heard, whose shores he had never walked. This summons of the water, it would set the course for all his days to come. So when the summons of the Valar, the powers of the world, came from the west bidding the elves to dwell with them in Aman, Nawe set out on the great journey. But before the Teleri could even reach the coast, their lord Elwë wandered into the forest of Nan Elmoth and was lost, utterly ensnared by the enchantment of Melian the Maya. Nawe was among those whose loyalty was greatest, and he searched long and faithfully for his lost king. But in this searching, his heart was torn. Because while he lingered, his other lord, Olwë, heeded the summons and led the main host across the sea to Valinor. For the sake of his fealty, Nawe forsook his own passage to the Blessed Realm. The Eldar say that in all waters there lives still an echo of the music of the Ainur, that great song that brought the world into being. So you see, Nawe's longing for the sea was no mere wanderlust. It was a deep memory in his spirit of that first music. It was a call he would spend uncounted ages seeking to answer, ever standing upon the shores of Middle-earth, looking west. The years of the trees ended in fire. In the theft of the Silmarils, Morgoth, the first Dark Lord, fled to Middle-earth, and in his wake came the host of the Noldor, in wrath and sorrow. As they returned to the mortal lands, the Valar set the sun to rise for the first time, and thus began a new and terrible age of open war. At long last, Nawe came to the shores of Beleriand and finally looked upon the great sea. And there he gathered those of the Teleri who, like him, had remained behind. It was then that he earned his new name, Círdan, the Shipwright, because he taught his people to build vessels, the first ever seen in Middle-earth, to sail upon the waves. His folk became the Philathrum, the people of the shore, and their great works were the havens of Eglarest and Brithenbar, the first true ports in all the land. With the coming of the Noldor from over the sea, Círdan offered not strife, but friendship. His closest bond was with Finrod, Felagund, the noble king of Nargothrond. The Noldor, you see, having learned their high craft in Valinor itself, they aided Círdan in the strengthening of his havens with walls of stone, and in turn, the ships of the Philathrum grew larger, more seaworthy, a testament to this great alliance of sea and stone. But of course, peace could not endure against the malice of Morgoth. In the year 473 of the First Age, after the disastrous battle that was named the Nirnathar Nordiad, the Battle of Unnumbered Tears, the hosts of Angband just swept across Beleriand. The havens of Brithenbar and Eglarest were besieged, their great walls broken. They were laid in utter ruin. Círdan, with just a remnant of his people, escaped the slaughter and found a final refuge upon the Isle of Belar. And upon that lonely isle, Círdan's purpose took a new form. Among the refugees who came to him was a child named Arundel, born of the unions of both elves and men. In the boy, Círdan saw a reflection of his own ancient longing for the sea, and with his deep foresight, he perceived that this child carried a great destiny. Círdan became his mentor, imparting to him all his lore of winds and tides and the secret arts of shipbuilding. So when Arundel grew to manhood and conceived his desperate hope to sail into the Forbidden West and plead for the aid of the Valar, it was Círdan who helped him. The wisdom of ages was poured into the fashioning of Arendel's ship, Vingalot, the Foam Flower. It was the fairest vessel ever to sail the seas of Arda, and its voyage did not fail. Arundel reached the Undying Lands, and the host of the West came at last to wage war upon Morgoth. The patient craft of the Shipwright was thus made instrumental in the salvation of all of Middle-earth. The war of wrath that followed was so terrible that the very lands of Beleriand were broken and drowned beneath the waves, and so the First Age ended. Upon the coastal remnant of the old lands, a region named Lindon, Círdan built a new refuge for his people, Mithlond, the Grey Havens, and the Second Age of the world began. Now, after the victory, the Valar lifted their ban. The way to the west was now open to all the Eldar who wished to forsake Middle-earth. Many did so, sailing from the Grey Havens Círdan himself had built. And yet, he who had longed for Valinor for millennia did not himself depart. This has always been the great question of his long life. Why did he remain? Well, the answer is found within his own heart. It's an oath he took upon himself in the sight of the sea. He perceived that a great duty was not yet finished. You see, there would be many yet who tarried, or who would need a path of return. Someone had to keep the havens, someone had to build the ships, someone had to maintain that link between the mortal lands and the undying west. And he took that burden for his own, a vigil that would last for another whole age of the world. And his duty became even more sacred after the downfall of Númenor, when the world itself was changed by the hand of Ilúvatar. It was bent, made round, and the land of Aman was removed from its physical confines. From that day forward, only the elves, in ships of a special hallowed craft, could find the straight road and pass beyond the circles of the world. And so Círdan's art reached its absolute zenith, as he mastered the building of these white ships, vessels that sailed not just on water, but on memory and desire, all the way to the shores of Valinor. In this new age, Sauron, the greatest servant of Morgoth, came among the elves in a fair guise, calling himself Anatar, the Lord of Gifts. He deceived the master smiths of Eregion, the Gwath Ymir Dain, and with their help he forged the rings of power. But Círdan, being ancient and wise, was not beguiled. He perceived the shadow behind the fair face and trusted him not. And he counseled the other lords to do likewise. When Sauron's treachery was finally revealed, war consumed the land. After the Dark Lord was driven back, Círdan was entrusted with one of the 3 rings of the elves, Narya, the Ring of Fire, set with a great ruby that glowed with an inner heat. It was a ring of inspiration, with the power to kindle hearts and grant courage against despair. He would bear this ring through the dark years that followed, and he stood with the High King Gilgalad and Elendil of Númenor in the War of the Last Alliance, where Sauron was, for a time, overthrown. The Second Age ended with the death of Gilgalad upon the slopes of Orodruin. Círdan returned to the Havens, now the oldest and greatest of the elven lords remaining in Middle-earth. And so began the long watch of the Third Age, as he stood a quiet, steadfast guardian of the fading light in the north. Throughout this long age, he remains the chief ally of the Dunedain of the North, the heirs of Elendil. When their kingdom of Arthedain was finally overrun by the Witch King of Angmar, Círdan learned that its last king, Arvidu, had fled north into the frozen ice bay of Forchal, and without a moment's hesitation, Círdan sent a ship on a perilous voyage into the grinding ice, all to bring the king to safety. Now, though the rescue mission came to ruin, the ship being crushed in the ice, the deed itself reveals the sheer depth of Círdan's loyalty. His faithfulness wasn't just to his allies, but to memory itself. You see, Arvedui was of the line of Elendil, and Elendil of the line of Elros, brother to Elrond and son of Eärendil the Mariner, the very man Círdan had taught and counseled back in the First Age. His faithfulness spanned the ages of the world. And though Arthedain fell, the Witch King's triumph was fleeting. A year later, Círdan led the Elves of Lindon to fight alongside the armies of Gondor at the Battle of Fornost. There, the power of Angmar was broken utterly, and it was Círdan's own lieutenant, Glorfindel, who spoke that famed prophecy concerning the Witch King, a doom that would find its fulfillment 1,000 years later upon the Pelennor field. Around the first millennium of the Third Age, 5 strangers arrived by ship at the Grey Havens. These were the Istari, emissaries sent from Valinor to aid the Free Peoples against the resurgent shadow of Sauron. Círdan alone knew their true nature and from whence they came. And as the keeper of Narya, a heavy choice now lay before him. Their leader was Curnenor, whom men called Saruman the White, and he bore himself with pride and great authority. But another came last, Olorin, whom men called Gandalf the Grey, who leaned upon a staff and seemed the least of them all. Círdan, with his ancient sight, looked past the lordly mien of Saruman and perceived the true spirit of Gandalf. He saw a strength, a humility, and a secret fire of the heart that the others just did not possess. And so, Círdan performed one of the most consequential acts of the entire age. He gave away the ring of power he had borne for more than 2,000 years. To Gandalf, in secret, he entrusted Narya, saying, "Take this ring, master, for your labors will be heavy, but it will support you in the wariness that you have taken upon yourself. For this is the ring of fire, and with it you may rekindle hearts in a world that grows chill." In this singular act of wisdom, he armed the West for the final war. For 2,000 years more, Círdan kept his vigil. He saw the War of the Ring fought and won. And at last, in the autumn of the year 3021, a company of travelers came to the Grey Havens. Elrond and Galadriel, their long labors ended. Gandalf, bearing the rings Círdan had given him, his mission now complete. And with them, the ring-bearers, Bilbo and Frodo. Círdan met them on the quay. The ship was ready. Círdan watched as the white ship passed out of the Firth of Lune and into the west until its light was lost to sight. And yet he remained upon the shore, because his oath, it wasn't yet fulfilled. This was not the last ship. The chronicles tell us that Círdan remained in Middle-earth well into the Fourth Age. He waited, you see, because others still lingered, most notably Celeborn of Lorien, who also carried a living memory of the elder days. Only when the very last of his ancient kin were ready to depart would Círdan's vigil finally end. It's held that he and Celeborn sailed together upon the last ship, sometime before the year 120 of the New Age, because when Queen Arwen Undomiel came at last to the Havens in that year, she found them silent and empty. Círdan was gone. And a final note is recorded of him, a detail that sets Círdan apart from all other elves in any tale. He bore a beard. Now, the Eldar do not age as mortals do, but Círdan was so unimaginably old, having lived through all the ages of the world, that he had passed into a third cycle of elvish life. That silver beard was a physical testament to an age so vast it's simply beyond all mortal reckoning. His legacy, then, is one of steadfast and faithful service. He never sought a crown. He even gave away a ring of power to one he deemed worthier. He was the living bridge between Middle-earth and the Undying Lands. He bore the true weight of immortality, not endless youth, but endless loss and endless waiting. And yet, his tale is one of ultimate fulfillment. He made a vow, and he kept it. And herein lies the deepest lesson of Círdan's life. In a history renowned for bright swords and shining banners, his was a heroism of a different kind altogether. It was the quiet, patient, unglamorous work of maintaining a haven, of building a ship, of keeping a promise across the long defeat of time.
And so, at the end of all things, he boarded a ship of his own making. The anchor was raised, the sails were set, and the last ship passed out of the Gulf of Lune. Círdan stood upon its deck and looked to the west, as he had for longer than any being had ever lived. The straight road opened before him, the circles of the world fell away, and the light of the silver shores of Valinor rose at last before the eyes that had waited for them since the stars first shone. His long vigil was ended. The shipwright had come home.